This is the M17 from SJGAM, a very unassuming handheld that a couple of years ago took the community by storm. And by community, I mean those tinkerers out there looking to challenge themselves. And they elevated this from its original, very poor software experience to get this thing to do things that maybe most people think they couldn't. And that started off my first taste of SJGAM. And on this channel, we have reviewed quite a few SJGAM products over the years. But today, we're going to take a look at the first one that I can think of that is moving SJGAM into another level, one that is becoming very competitive at the $100 range. But can they really compete? Can they really do something? Remember to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode of our content. But let's hop in and take a look at the M28, the PS Portal looking 7-inch wonder that says it can play PS2. Let's dive in.
This breaking news update confirms the U.S. is under a winter attack. We are seeing widespread electricity outages due to extensive storm damage.
What's that? Due to the ongoing threat of winter weather, I would encourage you all to charge your retro handhelds in case power is lost.
So today we're going to take a look at the SJGAM M28. As I said in the opening of this, their M17 product really opened the door for me personally to this company. I was amazed at what the community did, taking that low-powered device that had a decent screen size for PSP and trying to make the most of it and get it up and running and doing things that maybe the manufacturer probably should have done themselves. But now we're moving into a whole nother level, the M28. And as you can see on the box here, they very proudly show PS2. And when I first saw this, my initial thought was, here we go again. It's going to boot like, a couple of PS2 games that are 2D games that aren't really demanding, and they'll say it plays PS2. Kind of like how Ambernix RGDS plays 3DS. Although that's not a great comparison because that actually can play a little more 3DS. But anyways, let's get the box open or look at the box. And it's a nice box. This thing is huge. Oh my God. But I like the way it looks, the presentation. They've got the picture on here. They try to make the screen look nice. They've got this big glowing PS2 lettering down here. And then, of course, the SJGAM logo. On the sides of the box, we have their logo and the 128 gig sticker. And on the other side, we do have some information here. The 7.1-inch IPS display, 30-plus simulator platform, supports up to PS2. Jump color light and bracket hidden on the back. Moving to the bottom, and this is where things get really interesting because we do have the specs here, the M28 video game controller gamepad. So it says it's Linux, so no surprise there. Supports 30 emulators, not simulators. And then we have 2 Cortex A75s and 6 Cortex A55s up to 2 gigahertz. This is paired with an ARM Mali G52, not a G57. So they don't explicitly say what this CPU is, and so I'm interested in diving in and finding out what it is. It could be any number of things, but having those 2 A75 cores does say that maybe this thing can actually play some PS2. We'll have to wait and see how that does. But it does have a 4,000 milliamp battery, and it can support 256 gigs without the TF card. So says it's got 256 internal, and we got a 128 gig card. So the jumping RPG Rainbow, blah, blah, blah. This device has 10 copyright game cards. Users need to install it by themselves. Don't know what that's talking about. But anyways, as always, let's get this box open and let's start looking at what's on the inside. And again, this is a massive box. I mean, it's a really big box, but it's a really big handheld that has that 7.1-inch screen. We'll move the handheld out of the way. And the first thing we see is this floppy screen scratch protector. Come on, SJ Gam, you're gonna make this play PS2 and look like this. Give a better screen protector. We do have USB A to C, and then we have the manual, and that's about it. Not much else in there. Now the manual is in Mandarin and English, and function description, basic functions. So it's saying it's a 1024 by 600. That is a very weird resolution. Aspect ratio. It's very weird. Not quite 16:9. We'll have to look and see here. Support more than 30 emulators, built-in dual speakers. I like to see that. And then 4,000 milliamp battery again. 14 years of age, need to be accompanied by an adult. So not a lot here. But let's get this thing put back in the package and let's take a look at this handheld, because I'm very, very interested in seeing if this is the actual first one out of all that we've looked at in clones that might actually be the most closest to the PlayStation Portal. Okay, so out of the box, and this thing is pretty large. To give you an idea of the size of this, I'm going to show it next to my Legion Go S, which has that 8-inch screen. So this thing is nearly the same size overall, despite having a screen that's about an inch smaller. This thing feels pretty good to hold. So my initial impressions of this, picking it up, was that, yeah, this is a nice form factor. They have the right shape here with the handles. This looks a whole lot like the PS Portal. Now, we've seen some other lower end clones, and we've even reviewed a few on this channel that attempted to have that look, but this is the first one I think that I've actually held that feels like I'm holding a PlayStation Portal. Of course, it's not that. This is good plastic, but it's not the plastic you would find on a Sony product. You can still tell that it's a little bit different. But I gotta say that I like the shape of this. I like the way it feels. I'm really digging holding this and the comfortableness of it. But that's no good if the buttons and hardware are trash. So let's start our button testing as always. And I like the buttons. Now, these are a matte finish with a nice color to them. I will say it's a little bit interesting that going for the PlayStation Portal theme, we don't have the Sony buttons. Is anybody going to release one with Sony buttons? Because, I mean, Secure Modding is making probably, I think, making a decent living off of selling those. But kind of fascinating that they didn't do that to keep in the theme here. But we do have a nice colored XYBA. The buttons feel nice. They have a nice travel distance to them, and they're independent, so they're not super cheap. They feel pretty good. Probably the best for SJ GAM that I have tried. They certainly are miles better than that M17. Now, moving on to the D-pad, and the D-pad surprised me a little bit. I found the D-pad to be pretty good. I didn't think I was going to like it, but it has a nice soft touch to it, and it rockets and pivots in a nice way. It's not overly clicky, and it just has a good travel distance to it. I found in using it in fighting games, I was able to Hadouken and Shadouken pretty easily with that. And then my favorite part of this hardware, yes, I love the Magic X Retroid style sticks, and this doesn't have them, but what this does have is full size sticks. These remind me of the sticks on my Legion Go. They have a nice range to them, a big full range to them. They have a nice texture on it, which is amazing and really good, giving it a nice comfortable. Plus, they're in that classic PlayStation configuration right across from each other. Again, a missed opportunity here, SJ GAM, by not putting the triangle, circle, and square buttons on here and giving it the PS theme. Perhaps there's a copyright issue I'm not aware of, or something Sony has done to prevent that. But I really would have loved to have seen that. These have great sticks. So really good buttons, a better than expected D-pad, and great sticks. And then my first knock on this thing. These shoulder buttons, and maybe it's just my one unit, but they are a bit floppy and they feel really cheap. They're in a good space. I like the positioning of them and I like the type that they use, but they just feel, it's the first thing that feels really cheap on this to me, and it doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel like it's analog. I'm certain it's not. So even though it doesn't tell me on the box, I'm betting these are not analog Hall triggers, and it just isn't great. Moving past that, though, we do have some nice lighting effects on this on the front. I like the way they did the RGB. It's subtle, but it looks nice. It's not on the sticks. It's right there above the sticks. I think it looks pretty cool. We have a start and select button, and then we have a volume plus and minus. So all of that on the front facing. Moving around, there is nothing on the sides and nothing on the bottom, which gives us this good grip and weight. The balance of this, I can see why PlayStation Portal was regarded as a very comfortable handheld, even though I've never used one, but this feels really nice to hold and balance in the hands. Now on the top, we do have those dual firing speakers, so it's top firing speakers. We also have an on-off switch, and SJGAM has done on-off switches, so that's nothing new. We have a USB port, a headphone jack, and a single TF card slot. Looking at the back, we have one more trick up our sleeves. We do have this stand. Boy, this thing is clicky. Listen to this. But it has several settings and it works very well. You can easily set this thing. It'll look and hold it up. I like the idea of that. I like this quite a bit. I think it's one of the best implementations of a stand I've seen on a handheld yet. So honestly, I'm pretty digging the stand. So we have, what do we have here? We have a surprisingly nice looking, good feeling handheld with better than expected hardware, and the only knock is really the shoulder buttons, which feel kind of cheap and hopefully is maybe just my model. But we also have this big screen. Now here's the thing about this screen. Okay, it's obviously an older screen. The resolution of it is odd, and it's probably going to be not the best of IPS panels. I imagine this is a screen that could be more than 10 years old, maybe even. I'm not sure where they sourced this screen, but you can tell there's a big thick bezel around it. And so you do have to deal with all those. And although we're getting a big 7.1-inch screen here, we do need to temper expectations, especially since this thing is targeting around $100, which I think is a fair price for what you're getting here, especially if it can play PS2. But all the hardware in the world won't matter if we get our typical SJGAM software. And I'm really worried about that because in the past, we've had to have the community really help out, as I mentioned with the M17. So this thing might actually have really trash software, but let's turn this thing on and find out, and hit that switch and find out what kind of software we're working with. It said Linux, so we know it's not Android. Or is it? Is the box right? Oh, what are you doing, Dead Fred? I'm just adjusting my wearable camera here. That's right, guys. Sorry to stop the video, but I wanted to talk about this wearable camera that was sent to us from Aliexpress. We have the ability to record up to 2.7K, including voice, using a first-person perspective. This very budget-minded wearable camera is pretty cool, and I found a good experience with it. You can find more information in the link below, but the brand Situ comes in both black and white, and it gives me the ability to show you guys some of my first-person gaming as I'm playing here. It has a USB-C connection, which is pretty simple in order to power it up, a pretty long battery life, and it does have a nice little display here. It also uses a micro SD card, and there's an app for your Android or iOS phone that can connect to it and use it to see as a viewfinder. So if you're interested in this, please hit the link below and check it out. Again, it's got a 2.7K video, a 0.96 IPS screen, voice alert, recording audio, and this is the wearable camera from the first-person perspective from situ. We want to thank Aliexpress again for sending this over, even though I look like something off the Borg or Star Trek, but it works pretty good. Anyways, back to the show. Oh my, you're breaking my heart, SJ Gam. This is where the first problem comes. So, turning this thing on, we do get a nice vibration. That was a good surprise. And then we get a loading screen. And I did discover that if you try to load this without the supplied SD card, that it will go into the same sort of software experience minus the games. And so it's kind of interesting that being a Linux system, that it can actually still boot up without the card. As you can see here, the loading time in this thing is kind of a long loading time. And that in itself is not a big issue or problem. We would expect, this is not the Odin or Aya Neo here. So not really that suspicious. Again, at this point, we still don't know what this CPU is. We just know it has that two Cortex A75s, not the 76, but 75s, which could be, the G80. After a while, it will start showing that load-in screen. It's reading the SD card at this point, so it's pulling in the software, the games that are loaded on the SD card. Thanks to a Discord member, I was able to figure out how to add some games to this, and it's not simple and not something that I think most people could do. But as you can see here, we do have a very PS Vita looking screen. Now, initially, this screen here is not bad. I don't have an issue with this front end screen. It's simple. And once you go into whatever section of games, it has a simple layout along with a image. So I'm not opposed to it. However, once you look a little deeper, we see the setting. And when you go over to the setting, you are just really handicapped at what you can do. You have a show button, you have a volume and a system setting, and that's it. And this is not a touch screen, okay? So not a touch screen at all. However, this mentioned Linux, but if you go to the volume button, oh, what do we have there? Oh, the familiar Linux volume. Android volume. So it looks like maybe there's some little finagling going on here. I don't know what we've got here. I don't know the CPU, and I don't know what this software is. I know that there's not a lot you can do with it. On system settings, you can go in here and you can change the language. You can check the version, although I don't know what good that's going to do you. You can go to the model. You can restore factory settings. You can turn the vibration on and off. And again, the vibration is a pleasant surprise. The RGB lighting can be turned on and off. And that's it. There's no Wi-Fi, so you're not going to update this thing. You're not going to really be able to use Android if you somehow get into Android, because there is no Wi-Fi that I can tell. I guess you could use a dongle, but who knows? So this is a huge, huge disappointment to start. But to be fair, this thing said it could play PS2, right? And so if you look in the system here and look at the software, back out of this very limited setting, you have a history and a favorite, and then you have the game. And scrolling down, there's a lot of systems on here. And when you get to the bottom, there is a PS2 bubble. Okay? And so you go in there, and the first game they have is the Chain of War God Olympus with a picture of God of War 2. So I don't know what you're going to have. Then you have Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. You have Psychonauts. So there's some decent games here. But the initial excitement over this has been tempered a little bit because one, it's not a familiar custom firmware. We didn't get ArcOS or something along that lines. It looks locked down. It looks like it's on top of Android. There's no Wi-Fi. That's another huge bummer here. Why no Wi-Fi? Come on, no retro achievements. So let's get this thing playing some gaming, and talk about the experience playing this and what it means when it says it can play PS2 and what it can really do. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the video, but I wanted to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Nyxi. They are a wonderful company that makes lots of awesome controllers, including the Wizard 2, a GameCube looking controller that works with your Nintendo Switch. It offers things like a TMR Hall joystick, quick trigger switch, it has a C-stick right joystick, and it comes in this awesome Nintendo GameCube style grip. I find that it's really awesome, especially now that Switch Online has GameCube that you can play. I also want to mention that for the Switch 2 owners, they also have a Switch 2 Joy-Con adapter so that this controller can also, yes, now work with your Switch 2. And orders of $39.99 or more get this absolutely free currently. Make sure you hit the link in the description to check out our special code and savings. And I want to thank Nyxi for sending this over. As you see a little bit of gameplay here, I had a lot of fun with this. It's really awesome. The nostalgia is wonderful. We want to again thank Nyxi, and make sure you check out their awesome products. They have lots more, including more accessories, controllers, and yes, even a keyboard. Anyways, back to the show. All right, so I'm going to start with the PS2 experience because it's on the front of the box. And one of the first games that I tried out on this was Psychonauts, because I think Psychonauts is a decent indicator of whether this thing can satisfactorily play some PS2 or not. It is a 3D game. Now, there is a little bit of positive here. Pressing the start and select button together gets us into the familiar menu of Nether or Ether, whichever one this is. So we are working with that software, and you can go in and do some things, including changing the disc. Now, when I went to go change the disc, look what pops up. Oh my, again, Android. But I cannot navigate it. It's not a touch screen, and there's no way to make a mouse move around to change the game. So you can back out and go to their pre-installed game, but adding another game into this is not really going to be very helpful to do that. Now, so again, just more evidence that this is terrible, terrible software for somebody in the hobby. Now, approaching it as somebody that just got this and knows nothing about these things, yeah, I can see you turn it on. Oh, look, PS2. Oh, look at that game. Go click it, and it loads up and plays. And it's set to settings appropriate for whatever CPU this is. But let's go in here in playing Psychonauts. Everything, first of all, is at 1x. This is not going to play anything above 1x. And you do have the ability to drop it below 1x. But most of the gaming that I played on here at 1x seemed to play decent. Okay, SJGAM, I'm a bit surprised. Whatever CPU you used here, it's running along the lines of what I've seen most recently in the Magic X, the 1X35 with its G85, or the Ion Neo Pocket Air Mini with its G90. So this is somewhere along that line of it, probably a little bit weaker than those two, but still able to do it. Games like Psychonaut ran decently enough to play. You could tell that it was struggling a little bit overall. It was not like, for instance, the perfect frame rate, and you can see dips in it. And I doubt that there's any game on here that really is going to play really, really well. I did take it through and try several games, including something like Soul Calibur II, which surprised me and played somewhat well. That was a pretty nice sort of experience playing on that. I would say, as I show some more gameplay here, I would say that something like Jak And Daxter, the original one, was a bit choppy and slow, although I can see somebody maybe making it through and playing it. Um, we tried something like Hot Shot Golf 3, which is very demanding, and it was near impossible to play, which is not surprising. Capcom versus SNK 2 played really good, so 2D fighting games are going to play on this really well. There's some Capcom Fighting Evolution. Half-Life is another game that played pretty decently on this to go through it. And Crash Bandicoot 4 looked good, but was a little slow. You could tell that it was moving slow and not at the right sort of movement. One game that surprised me a little bit was SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini. I've never played that. That game actually played pretty well and looked pretty good for a 3D game. So overall, the PS2 experience on this is super minimal. I'd call it a bonus. But what that does say is that then once I dropped down and started playing some of the other systems they have on here, then you can really start to see that the CPU can do some pretty decent stuff. We do have PSP on here, and PSP, including Tekken 6, played really good. In fact, I would say this is certainly above what we've seen like in the TrimUI Smart Pro S with the A527. I think this thing is going to be maybe exceeding that CPU just by a little bit. And it also has God of War on here, and it ran pretty good. PSP was a pretty good experience. Equally, Dreamcast was also a nice Dreamcast was also a nice surprise here, playing pretty well. And of course, N64. So overall, we have some pretty impressive play here at $100 and a big screen. And let's talk about that screen and wrap this video up, because I do have some thoughts on the screen. All right, so the screen here. This is a nice big screen. And at $100, you're not likely to see this size screen that is not playing just pure crap. That being said, I've worked with so many other screens lately. You can easily tell this is a very lower quality screen. Okay, there's some ghosting that happens on this. It has a very thick bezel, and the brightness on it at an angle diminishes a bit. Take all that into account, and I still find this to be a impressive enough screen for the shape and size of it, the weight of it. The viewing angles are good enough, and if it had better software, I would probably be even more excited about this. We have a run-of-the-mill, a little below average screen in quality, but makes it up for more in size and also the speakers. Now, the other impressive thing we have here is rumble that feels really good. This is one of the best feeling rumbles I've had in a while. And I think it might be just the sheer size of this thing, but I really found the rumble in this to be extraordinary, which was kind of surprising. It has a pretty good placement of where they placed it, and its strength is nice and not overbearing, but significant enough to know it. When you turn this thing on, you feel it rumble. So, overall, here are my thoughts on this. At $100, I think that this is a okay value proposition. There's not a lot of other competition at this size. Something like the TJD80 that we reviewed with the Rockchip 3588 had that big, beautiful 4:3 screen ratio. That thing was awesome and bigger than this. But I really think the other that we've seen 6 or 7 inch handhelds in the budget range are just not great handhelds. This can play some PS2 guys, especially fighters. A lot of 2D fighters and some of the 3D fighters play pretty good. It has really nice large sticks. I like the placement of it. The RGB is tasteful and can be turned on easily. The buttons are nice and matte finish and big. The D-pad is surprisingly good, and the shoulder buttons disappoint a little bit. It has really good sound to it coming from 2 top firing speakers, and it has that awesome little kickstand. So I am very hopeful, and the reason I showed the M17 at the beginning of this video is I'm hopeful that this thing gets the love and attention from the community that the M17 did, and that we find a way to get Rocknix on this, or we get, you know, Arc OS or Dark OS or any other custom firmware on this, or even maybe proper Android. Again, it doesn't seem to have Wi-Fi. I don't know if you could add Wi-Fi through a dongle. You have a single USB port, so it would take that port up for that reason. And it's not a touch screen, so Android probably would not be good anyways. I don't think this is running Linux, and we don't know what CPU this is. I'm going to do another video where I open this thing up. I wanted to first get this thing reviewed and kind of just give my thoughts and everything before I potentially damage it trying to open it up. It looks a little bit complex or daunting to get into this to verify the CPU the way it's designed. I may or may not actually do that video, but I'm thinking about it. It has some pretty specific looking screws to get in. Now, I will say they did release something called the M88 Game Stick, and there are references in here in the manual, in the folder on the SD card to that same thing, and that turned out to be a MediaTek G80. So maybe that's what we're running with here. But that's my thoughts, guys. I found myself weirdly liking this. I like the hardware. I would love to see AYN attempt this on a 7-inch OLED screen, maybe the screen that we have in their Portal, and this same shape and this nice, you know, weight distribution and everything, and running a Snapdragon G3 Gen 3, that would be awesome. I'd pay money for that because I like the way this feels to hold. I just like the way it feels to hold. It feels nice. You don't have to add grips to it. It's really pleasant. It's got a really nice kickstand, and yeah, that's what I would like. Remember to hit that like button. I'm sorry. Remember to hug your loved ones and love your hugged ones, because tomorrow is never promised. We'll see you next time, Deadheads. It's going to be really cold this weekend for some of you. Stay warm. See you next time. Deadfred out.